Hello everybody and welcome to the stream. We are going to be doing a Q&A session today, and I have it listed as just an open Q&A. Essentially, what we got going on is I have a bunch of questions that I have pulled off of my YouTube channel, stuff that I get really frequently, and kind of a lot of repeat questions. I have a FAQ down below on my Twitch stream here that has, some of my most asked questions, but there's only a few down there. So I thought it would be cool if we grabbed a bunch of those, some of those things that I guess get asked all the time, and try to answer some of those. And a lot of them are, techniques and different stuff here in ZBrush, but also during this time, if you guys have any questions or anything that you specifically want to see during this stream, shout it out in the chat, and we will take priority over your questions here live, over what I have pulled off of some common stuff from my YouTube channel. And I do have, I do have the hiccups. I haven't hiccuped yet. I've been trying to get rid of them, and I have not been successful. Whew, so I'm hoping that they're gone. I'm not really sure. So I'm just going to go through all these questions here and try to answer as many as I can. And if we do get through all of them, I have some other models here around on the screen that I have some stuff that I want to do on my dragon for thickening some areas up for printing. And I still have some stuff that I want to do on the face of my Great Prince of the Forest. So again, if you guys have any questions, I see some of you starting to jump in here. My stream is kind of frozen on me, but I see Hudboy is here. What's going on, Hudman? I'm going to try refreshing my stream. Alright, well that didn't work. So again, if you guys got questions, dump them in the chat, and we are going to answer those over top of what I have here. But let's go ahead and answer the first question. Which is, do you pretty much, this is from Biscuit over on YouTube, and I've seen this question like a ton, but it's a lot of people asking, when do I use Dynamesh? When do I use Dynamesh, and when do I use ZRemesher and subdivision levels? How do I know when to jump between the two of those? And it's kind of a tough question, because it's not, it's not a situation where you would say, alright, it's time to use Dynamesh, it's step 3, Dynamesh step, right? And it's step 5, this is the ZRemesher and subdivision step. That's not really how I like to think of it. If we take a look at our deer, the Great Prince of the Forest, Bambino here, I have used a variety of, jumping back and forth between Dynamesh and ZRemesher. So it's not, I don't start off creating a part of this and then Dynamesh it, and then once I get a little bit further along, ZRemesh it. It's on a case-per-case basis. So what I would like to do is import an older version of this. Let's see. There it is. I will import, hopefully it's this one. Yes, alright, perfect. So this is an older version of our deer, our Great Prince of the Forest. And you can see that a lot of these pieces of geometry do in fact have subdivision levels. I can step up and down through those and go to the lowest subdiv where it's about 6,000 or 7,000 polys, step up, and you can see that I've refined that form as I've stepped up through those subdivision levels. But some of these pieces are formed, at least in the beginning stages, through Dynamesh. And for instance, let's take a look at this body. I'll just do a quick Dynamesh on this, right at around 300, and that's maybe a little bit too high for this piece, but it's okay, it gets the point across. So the body here, which actually has a piece of the neck fused in, was all Dynameshed together. And, let me move this over to the side. Hip Hop Bebop, what is going on? Welcome to the stream. So this body, and many of these other pieces of geometry, started off in Dynamesh. And the reason for that, literally the only reason for that, is because it's just a little bit easier, I think, for you to manipulate geometry. So if I insert a sphere, and I want to start making this sphere into this body, well, I'm going to have to scale up and stretch this all around to start forming this body shape. And when I do that, the polygons start stretching really, really far. And I find that it's just a lot easier to do a lot of this stuff in Dynamesh. So I can just be really rough with my geometry and I don't have to worry about, you know, any polygon stretching, because if it does get to that point, right, again, where those polygons are stretching more and more, I can just Dynamesh again and it fixes all that up. Once I do get to a point where I am ready to, you know, so we've shaped up our sphere, we've got it up to this point, we've formed the body, we have, let's go back to even where we had subdivisions on it. I have subdivisions on the body and I have subdivisions on the leg. Now I want to eventually merge these together, but when we do that, we're gonna have to, excuse me, hiccups are coming back. When we do that, we're going to lose our subdivision levels because we're either going to live boolean those together or we're going to Dynamesh them together. I'm going to just do a quick Dynamesh on those just so we can show this process. So again, it's not whether or not we're using Dynamesh or ZBrush at a particular stage. I won't even blend these yet because I want you to see. So they are Dynamesh together. The topology is a complete mess. But now what we can do is we can hide all of our subtools except for this one. So the eye icon should be next to only that subtool. We can duplicate it, and then we can go down into Geometry, ZBrush, and just ZBrush at a really low target poly count. Let's say 2,000 polys. This number is indicative of thousands. So putting that on 2 would say 2,000, and I have symmetry on, so that's actually saying 4,000. So roughly, it's probably going to be around 4 to 6K after everything is said and done. So it's about 5,000 polys, right around there. And we have a little bit easier to manipulate topology because we got some nice edge loops going around here. That's all nice, that's all good. So now from here, you've noticed that we've obviously lost a lot of the shape and form, and you know, we want to get maybe some of that back in, especially if you have some texturing or anything like that. Right now we don't at this stage. So all we have to do is Control D to add a subdivision, and then click on Project. The default settings for this should be totally fine. And the important thing to remember when doing this is just to make sure that these two eyeball icons are active only on these subtools. I have solo mode turned on, which totally works with this. Solo mode just means that whatever subtool you have active is the only one that can be seen, but its visibility is still active. So that is why projection works even with solo mode turned on. So I'll do another subdivision in project, and I won't do a third one because for something like this it's just not necessary. We're not really missing a whole lot of form. So I can just delete that extra Dynameshed piece that wasn't doing us any favors. We don't need that anymore. So now at this point, we've combined our geometry, we've gotten back to subdivision levels through projection, and now I have subdivs that I can step up and down through rather quickly using D and Shift D and begin cleaning up and smoothing this out. So again, it's not a question of when do I use Dynamesh and, you know, at what stage do you only use Dynamesh, do you only use subdivs? It's definitely a situation where, just depending on where you are and what you're doing, like, do I need to combine some stuff? You know, there's a ton of different situations where you could be flip-flopping between the two. So hopefully that helps clear up some of that information. That's definitely one of the things I get asked all the time. Engine, your tablet came in today. That's fantastic. Congrats. I think it's a little bit late. Wasn't it supposed to come like last week or something? Arg, what is going on? Finally time to watch you working and learn. Awesome. Well, welcome. Welcome back. So today, now that we got some more people in here, I'm going over a lot of frequently asked questions that I have over on my YouTube channel. I have a notepad document over here on my other monitor with a few of those that I have been picking and choosing right before our stream here, just stuff that I see all the time, and I think it would be nice to just go over all that stuff pretty quickly here. But also during this time, I want you guys that are here live, if you have anything specific that you want to see or any questions that you have, now would be a great time to ask those. And I will definitely give priority to people that are here live, and as I run out of some of those, we'll go back and forth to some of these very common, frequent questions that I get over on my YouTube channel. So that was a little bit about subdivisions and Dynamesh and when to use each one, and how you can kind of combine those and work with them together. So it's just very helpful to flip-flop between those. And you'll notice that the Dynamesh button is still checked down here. So that means that Dynamesh is still active. I do have subdivs, but what that means, if I control click and drag on my surface, I will Dynamesh that. So maybe you don't want that to happen, so I'll just undo that. But to make sure that that doesn't happen, just uncheck Dynamesh. Now if you do that on accident, it's not going to do anything. It's not going to screw anything up. So just to be aware of what your tools are currently doing, and just be a little well, careful, I guess. They sent it in 7 days. 7 days. Let's see here. All right, we'll just hop on over to the next question. So this is a question from Pedro most recently, but I've seen this quite often, and it's about extractions, using extractions in ZBrush. And there are a lot of ways to do extractions in ZBrush. I'm going to look at, let's maybe look at this guy. Or, trying to think what would be a better example. Let's grab our deer. Let's grab our deer boy. Or even let's just keep using this. I think this will be fine. All right. So for an extraction, if you guys don't know the standard use of extractions, a lot of the time they're used to make clothing or really any kind of additional geometry on top of your surface. So if you had a character man, there's just so many things that I could do here. Let's do, for a quick example, let me turn off everything except for this character's head. And this is probably the fastest example that I can think of. I'll turn off her hair as well, just so we can see this. Alright, so here's a little witch character that we did during October, and let's say you want to give this character a very quick, simple necklace. So we're going to be using extractions, and I am at first going to use the just typical extraction method, which is in Tool, Subtool, Extract. And I'm sure you guys, or at least some of you, have used this before, but it works with masks in ZBrush. So the standard way that you would do something like that is you would just, create your mask shape. I'm using the mask lasso. You can hold the control key and change your mask brush up here. And then I'll just use a couple different masks here to very quickly create a quick choker or something like that. That's something really quick. It's essentially just a masked ring that I have going around her neck. And I know it looks a little awkward with just her head and neck floating here without the body, but we'll have to deal with that. So then we're going to come down into extract here, and your thickness by default I think is set to 0.2 or 0.02. I really can't remember, it might be 0.2, but by default that thickness is massive. So for using it for clothing or necklaces, you're probably going to want to lower this quite a bit. So I had it on 0.001, I think. And that extraction is heavily dependent on the scale of this object as well. So 0.001, that seems to work, but if I rotate the camera around, it disappears. So what you want to do is click extract, let that get out there, and then click accept. So now that I have that extraction, it will create a new piece of geometry. And you do have to make sure that you control click and drag on your canvas. That'll clear the mask. And what's really nice about this kind of extraction is that it creates 3 polygroups. The outside polygroup, an internal polygroup, and then a polygroup for your edges as well. So what's great about that is that you can do a little trick here. Well, maybe you're happy with that shape that you extracted, but what I like to do a lot of the time is go into ZBrush and turn on Keep Groups, and then drop down my target poly count, pretty low. We'll say like, you know what, let's just go as low as we can. We'll see what this does. So what Keep Groups will do when I click on ZBrush, it will try to follow the edges between these polygroups, and it will try to retain those polygroups. Now it's done a pretty bad job because it's closed that top edge, so we'd probably want to adjust our poly count settings there, but for the bottom edge, it's done a pretty good job, so we're very close. So maybe just a little bit more resolution there, or maybe we just got an awkward close holes thing going on there. We might be able to just fix that manually. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's gonna freak out. So there might have been some open geometry there. Let's try it again and just maybe bump up that poly count just a little bit. See if that fixes it. There is some crazy warbling going on with our edge here, so it can just be dependent on a lot of things. But that looks like it got out there pretty good for our topology. We definitely have a lot of edge loops, but we do have our pretty basic shape for whatever necklace or a choker we want to create with an extraction here. So that is the most simple way to go about doing an extraction. And then from here, it's really easy to use something like your Z modeler brush and edit the low poly topology, low poly poly count you got going on here. If you want to delete edge loops, I typically do that just to clean stuff up, really get rid of some of those extra points in the surface that are just really unnecessary for something like this. So I'll do something like that very frequently, or if there's too many vertical, that's weird, it's being weird. Too many vertical edge loops, we can delete some of those and clean that up. That just makes it a little bit easier to manipulate. So that's the standard way of using extractions. The way that I like to use extractions, I'll show you on, we'll go back to our old version of our deer since it's symmetrical. It'll be a little bit easier to work on. Let's see, Lamentios, welcome back. Piece is awesome, thank you. And Hubert, welcome guys. So for people that are just popping in here, I see that there's a lot more now. We're doing some live Q&A. I have a list of questions that I've pulled off of my YouTube channel. A lot of popular, really common questions that I see all the time, and I'm trying to answer those. But if you guys have questions or anything that you would like to see specifically today, now is the time to ask, and I'll be taking priority over everybody that's live here over a lot of these questions that I got on my YouTube. But if not, I'll just keep going through a lot of these questions that I have on my YouTube channel. So the way that I like to extract a lot of the time is also using masks. It's actually a combination of masking and just selections. So I will duplicate my body, and I'm going to start blocking out what will be a saddle for my deer. Just something random, right? So I will delete my subdivision levels because I'm going to need those to be gone. And then I'm going to use my mask lasso tool and just mask off a basic, really quick saddle shape, right? So we have that, and now instead of using the extract button, I'm going to use Control W, and what Control W does is it polygroups whatever you have masked. If you press it when you have nothing masked, it polygroups everything. So I've done that, and then I'm just going to Control Shift click this geometry, and then go into Geometry Modify Topology down here and click on Delete Hidden. So all of that's gone now. So now I just have this piece of geometry. And what's great about having this is it's not extracted yet. And by the way, if you want to see backside polys, you have to go down into Display Properties Double. But what's great about this is that I have a little bit more control over how I extract this and how I create thickness for this. So I'm just gonna slide it up a little bit and we can start figuring out what we wanna do with our saddle. I'm noticing that my selection isn't very clean. We have a lot of jagged edges. So what I'll be doing is using ZBrush with a target poly count of say 1 or so and try to clean up a lot of those edges. And it's not doing a great job, so I'll undo that and instead go to edge loop and just run a default group loops function. And that will help get rid of the quick jagged edges there. And then again, I'll do a ZBrush, and this time my edges will be a lot more clean. And it's still a little high poly, so let's undo that. Let's just go as low as we can. Again, we'll do 0.1. Perfect. So now we have a thin plane of geometry, still not extracted, but we can use this now to begin creating our saddle. So if I would like to create some thickness here, I like to use the Z modeler brush. There's a lot of ways to create thickness on something like this. Hover over a poly, hold space, and go to extrude all polygons. And then I'm just gonna click and pull in on that, and I can add thickness at whatever scale I want. So again, this gives you a little bit more control, and I can also pull that the other way, or I can pull it both ways. You know, it's very dependent on what you want to do here. So I'll just pull that down and line that up a little bit. I will also flip my normals, which is down in your display properties again. When you extract with this method, ZBrush gets a little confused and doesn't know which way your normal should be facing. So I'll just flip my normals. And now I have the beginnings of a saddle. And if I would like, I can start extracting edges or faces out around this edge and start getting some of that, rounded geometry that we would see around that. I can start adding some subdivs and maybe start manually sculpting in some of that. It's really up to you at this stage. So this is pretty much how I always do extractions, unless it's for something that I want to do with like clothing. It just really depends. It depends what's faster. But a lot of the time, it's kind of looking like a little bit of a Yoshi saddle right now. But a lot of the time, thank you, Lee Silver, for the follow. A lot of the time, this way's a lot faster for me and gives me some more control. So there we go. That's how I do extraction. So again, we looked at the masking method, just the standard mask and extract, and then the way that I did it by soloing some geometry so that you can only see certain parts of that, and then just deleting everything else and manually extracting that. Not ZBrush related, but who is your favorite sculptor or sculpture of all time? My favorite sculpture of all time is probably hands down the David. It is amazing. I've been able to see it in person, and no pictures, no images will ever do it justice. I don't really have a favorite sculptor though, but got some wieners on stream. Like, no images do justice to this. Like, it's so big when you're standing, your head maybe comes up to his feet or his stand. It's like, it's everything about it is just so many years that he poured into it. It's amazing. Like, it's overwhelming. Like, I could just stare at this statue in person again all day. And I probably stood there for like half an hour, no joke. But yeah, that's probably my favorite sculpture of all time. And I'm sure it's many others. Is your custom UI available anywhere? Yes, it is available in my ZBrush Quick Start course. But that is the only place that it is available to my knowledge. Raul, thank you for the follow. I appreciate it. Welcome to the stream. Let me see here. I have been asked about my ZBrush UI, more than a few times, so maybe that's something I throw up somewhere online. So let me make a note of that really quick. Let's see. Got another question here. When it comes to hands and feet, what workflow do you prefer? Some I've seen like to use insert multi-meshes for fingers onto a sphere, and some like sculpting it out all out of a block. How do you go about it without webbing issues? So I haven't experienced any webbing issues in an extremely long time, but that was definitely something that, you know, I experienced early on, and I think you'll get better at getting rid of that kind of stuff the more you practice using like Dynamesh and stuff. I actually just deleted a bunch of old files from this. These hands are really simplistic, and not like, I really didn't like take these to the next step or anything. So they're pretty simple, they're really like planed out and everything. But the basic way that I start doing hands is I start, let's do this. Let me chop off some fingers. And we'll do that. So the basic way that I start a hand, typically, is with a shape basically that's just a wedge that represents your palm, and then I'll create that extra little wedge for the beginning of your thumb pulling out there. So this is kind of what I start doing. I start with a sphere or a cube and, you know, start setting that up, get the proper angles in there, and just start shaping that up. And then what I will do is create one finger, and I will create just a single mesh, typically just a pulled out cylinder or sphere or something, and then I'll start slowly building up that shape over time until it gets to something that I feel comfortable with. I'll typically keep it extremely low poly, and I'll keep this stuff low poly as well. And then what I like to do is just take that main finger and duplicate it really quickly, you know, make any changes that need to happen. If it's a pinky, I'll scale it down, right? We'll scale it down and rotate it and get it a little bit more into position down here, rock on, and then we'll continue doing that same process for the rest of the fingers. Same thing for the thumb. I'll just duplicate this piece, cut off an extra joint, right? You only got two, at least showing. The third is up in your little extra wedge of your palm there. So, and then I'll attach that down here and just kind of move and rotate that and continue building up those shapes from there. So nothing too crazy, but I find a lot of the time that it's just easier to keep things a little bit more separated, split off into parts. My common saying is, when in doubt, split it out. If you're having trouble creating a specific shape, try doing that. Try splitting some stuff up. Let's see. Tech is planning on sculpting a classical sculpture. Do you think Youthful Hercules is a good one? I would probably have to look at Youthful Hercules, but I think any classical sculpture or master study, master copy, I think those are often very productive, and I think you can learn a lot from those. But let's see, let's look up, what's his name? Youthful Herc? I hope he looks like the Disney Herc. Bam! He's kind of ugly in the face, isn't he? Dang that hair. I've seen sculptural hair like this before, out of stone. This is marble? Yeah. It's always insane to me. I've seen some crazy marble cloth before. There's also some pretty intense cloth going on here, it looks like. But yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun. In terms of like style, I'm not a huge fan of a lot of that Greco-Roman anatomy, but I think in general this would be a lot of fun to sculpt. And I don't know your level of skill, but I think it would be a challenge for anybody. Let's see. Awesome, thank you, no problem. Let's continue on with some more questions. All right. So if you don't know, I see some more people in here. We're answering a lot of Q&A stuff, a lot of common questions that I get over on my YouTube channel, and as well as answering your questions here live on stream. So another question from Asadi and many others on YouTube is a question about using curve brushes and just kind of struggling in general figuring out how to use curve brushes. So let's go back to our witch here, and we'll look at the hair, because the hair that I've created started off as a curve brush. And I will, I guess, turn off the hat. We'll see. Yeah, we'll just toggle off the hat real quick so we can see the hair a little bit easier. And I will toggle off that piece of geometry, which is this strand here, and grab that little piece that's representing just some kind of hairband there. All right, so we are going to create a curve to represent a tube of geometry. If you guys have ever heard of hair tubes or anything similar, if you're creating some kind of stylized hair, it's also a good way to just block out stuff in general, even if you're going for a more realistic look. So the way that I always start is wherever I need that hair, I will take that subtool, which just so happens to be this hairband, and duplicate it. And the reason I'm duplicating it is because it's going to be deleted after I am done. So this is essentially just here so that I can insert the hair on top of it. So I have this. I want to make sure that it doesn't have any subdivision levels. If it does, you want to click on Delete Lower. And then from there, I'm just going to use one of the most common brushes for this, which is the Curve Tube or Curve Tube Snap Brush. I'm just going to take that, and with solo mode active, because the Curve Tube Snap Brush will snap to things that it can see, so that's why it's snapping to that, I'm going to keep solo mode on and draw out my curve. And it's just drawn that straight or perpendicular to the camera, which is fine. I'll take that and we can manipulate it from here. And I'll hit Shift D because we had smooth on our dynamic subdiv. And now we have a tube of geometry following along our curve. But what's awesome about curves, and I know some people that are new kind of struggle with these, is you can manipulate it after you place it on the canvas. And sometimes it's a little difficult to figure out how to use some of that stuff. But we'll talk more about that in just a moment. Another great thing about curves is that you can insert other stuff on top of your curve that you've already drawn out. So if maybe you've edited your curve a little bit, you can just click on a curve after switching your brush, and this one's freaking out a little bit, so maybe we'll switch it to something else. It might be because it's a triparts, I'm not really sure. But you can swap this. There, let's turn on solo mode. There we go. I think solo mode was making it freak out. You can swap that with any other curve brush that you have active. So I'm not sure if this is, yes it is, cool. So you can use a variety of different brushes here. But we're gonna stick with just the default that I use, that Curve Tube Snap Brush. Now if you want to delete your curve that you have, you can just tap on anywhere on your geometry where your curve is not. That will delete your curve. Or if you want to just make sure that you have all the curves deleted there, you can go into Curve Functions under Stroke and click on the actual Delete Curve button. And before I do that though, there's one thing I would like to do in my curve modifiers, and I do this quite often. Thank you, Stang, for the follow, I appreciate it. We're going to click on Size, and we are going to adjust our curve fall off here. So by default, that will make the curve go from thin to thick. But if we swap this, obviously we're going to get the opposite effect. So I'll just pull up and pull down here. And now we can get a little bit more of a tapered effect on our hair really easily. So again, that's just curve modifier size and mess with the curve in there. And then of course there's lots of other things that you can do with these curves, but I'm not going to mention too many of them. You can add additional points, or you can click and drag them off to make them go away, and just tap your curve to update that again. You can actually add one, drag it off, and drag it back on, and that will give you a hard transition between those 2 points. So if you don't want that to be quite as gradual. All right, so I'm just gonna tap, delete that curve, it's gone now. And now from here, we can start manipulating this with our move brush and you know, whatever other brushes we want to manipulate our curve with. And then from there, it's just using, we will want to delete that other piece of geometry that we inserted on. So to do that, Control-Shift-Click your inserted geometry, and Geometry Modify Topology, delete hidden to get rid of that. Yes, hair. Yeah, we've been doing a lot of stuff with hair for the past few style studies, but for longer stuff with curves, hopefully that clears up some of the confusion there with just inserting curves. I see a lot of a couple of the files that I was sent for our ZBrush Saturday critique last weekend had some curves just randomly inserted on some subtools, and you definitely want to avoid that. You don't want to have any just floating curve manipulators like this thing. This is the actual curve, that white and black dashed line there. Alright. So let me know if you guys have any more questions about using curves, but other than that, if not, we're going to continue on looking at some more stuff here. And I think the next thing is... these two actually go hand in hand, so I'll do this one first. So the first question is trouble with splitting some models, and this comes from Frosty Dog and a bunch of other people, but they're the person that asked it most recently over on YouTube. So let's talk about splitting up some models. Who would be really good to do this with? Let's look at our deer. And I am going to split off... Okay, yeah, here's a really good example, I think. So let's say you have a character and you want to open that character's mouth, and you don't have a really good way of doing that. Right now I have this mouth separated so that it's just a blocked out additional color here, and I even have two poly groups here, which makes this even easier. I'm going to delete that poly group, though temporarily, just so we can see how we would do this without. But if we look here, this is a solid piece of geometry. I don't have a way that I can open up that mouth and get in there. So some people like to dig in with some brushes, maybe taking a dam standard or just a standard brush, and really start to carve in there and try to get a hole in your geometry and just start, you know, really cutting into your surface, and then eventually be able to pry that open. I don't really like using this method. I like to retain the shape that I've sculpted if I have something like this. So what I will typically do is begin by masking or slicing geometry, or just using, you know, some standard selection brushes to start making my proper selection. And because I already have, like I said, I have some nice poly groups here, it's going to make this really, really easy for me. So what I will do is just Control-Shift-Click on one of my poly groups, and that will hide the other one. And what's great about poly groups is, you know, you can do some quick selections, but if you don't have them, again, I recommend just using some mask lasso, some selection lasso, really whatever you can to start creating the shape that you need. You'll probably have to do some positive and negative masking if you really want to get that nice and clean, but, you know, in just a few short seconds here, I've already created the basic shape that I want. And then I would maybe come in here with a mask pen and make sure that we're getting up to that edge, and just really, you know, go through and clean that up. But again, I'm gonna use what I already have, might as well. No reason not to. So to mask something that already has a poly group, you activate your transpose or 3D gizmo, and then just Control-Click on your poly group. Right now it's being very odd, and it's actually not working. There we go, now it's working. So 3D gizmo or transpose. So that will mask that off for you. Koo, thank you for the follow and welcome to the stream. But instead what I'm going to do is just Control-Shift-Click a polygroup, and you want to use your select rectangle to make sure you don't select an edge loop. I'm going to delete my subdivs, and then I'm going to go to Split, Split, Hidden. So now I have those as two separate subtools, two separate objects. They are no longer connected. And I'm just going to line up from the side here with my mouth, grab my transpose tool, and rotate that mouth open. And maybe that looks a little derpy right now, but I want to get this opened wide enough that I can start working with this. And then I can run a close holes operation. We'll even turn off the polypaint on these so we don't have to worry about that. And we'll close holes on both of those. So that's modify topology in your geometry palette as well. So maybe we want, maybe we want to close that up a little bit more and begin making sure that that is a little bit nicer. But that is basically how we would go about splitting our geometry. And now the second part of this question is trouble with merging subtools. So we'll talk a little bit about that moving forward from here next. Let me just make sure we don't have anything else in here. When you do hair, do you split each hair strand into a subtool, or do you just use polygroups? It's very dependent on how complex the hair is. For our witch character, I'll turn off the hat again so you can see some of this. But a lot of these pieces of geometry up here, these were originally separate strands of geometry. And you can see that some of them are still separated into their own little pieces here, because they were a little bit easier to do symmetrically. And then those are also one subtool. So at one point they were not, and then I merged them all together. So as long as they all have the same subdivs, which they all do except for this last one, so I won't actually, you know what, I won't add an extra subdiv in there. I'll keep that at 5. So when you're merging subtools, you can see what's happening here. So if I merge these two hair strands together with merge down, then merge, merge down, it'll say this is not an undoable operation, just click OK. What's good about this operation is that it retains your subdivs up to the lowest common subdiv denominator, lowest common denominator essentially. So they both had 6, so now they still have all 6 subdivision levels. For this one it only has 5 though, so if I were to merge that down, this will only have 5 subdivs that I can step back on. But the geometry still does have that subdiv information, and to get that back, I would have to reconstruct a subdiv. And now it's saying up here, mesh contains triangles, operation canceled. It means that it would not be able to do that operation. So if I took one of these pieces of geometry and split it off, I should still be able to reconstruct that now, and it has allowed me to reconstruct that. The only problem was that this geometry, these 3 front pieces, did not have that extra subdiv that they could go back to, and therefore it was not allowing us to do that. So we do still have 5 here. Again, when I'm building them out, I typically like to keep them separated. It just allows for a little bit more control. But as we get a little bit further along in that process, you can start, you know, combining them like I've done here. I don't think it's gonna hurt anything. It's really up to you. And like I said, depending on how complex that hair could be, it might be easier to just keep some of them together, even merge some together with Dynamesh or something like that. Very dependent. Oh my gosh. Verlix Skills, what a name. Welcome to the stream. Do I have any idea why your Blender closes as soon as you Alt-Tab? I have no idea. I have no idea why your Blender does that. I don't really use Blender. Do I use much of ZModeler when doing hard surface stuff? Yes, absolutely. I use ZModeler all the time. If you look at this hat, if I step down all the way to the lowest subdiv, this was all made from a cylinder that I just Z-modeled. And then after I got to a good shape that I liked, I started adding subdivisions and started sculpting some additional form on there. So this was Z-modeled. There are a lot of other things that I do with Z-modeler, like Z-modeling in general. I don't have any like other, let's see, here's actually a perfect hard surface example. This stand was Z-modeled, again from a cylinder, and I subdivided up so that we could get some actual geometry represented in that form. So if I step all the way back down, you'll see that this was Z-modeled from a cylinder. Just using a lot of edge loops and beveling of edges and creasing, and really that's about it. Let me let that quick save finish. I'll subdivide that back up. Give us a little bit of a chest piece or just like a bust stand for our little dragon boy here. If you are interested in seeing some stuff with Z-Modeler, or if you have any specific questions about using Z-Modeler, feel free to throw them in the chat, or over on my YouTube channel, that's where all these videos get uploaded. You can check that out for that process. Keep losing your projects every time you Alt-Tab. That does not sound like any fun. Is ZBrush easier than Blender? Might switch over. You know, I don't know. I don't know. I couldn't say. I would probably guess not. Alright, so moving on, we've looked at splitting geometry, and now we're gonna look at merging geometry back together. So obviously we would want to sculpt this up really nicely and get this to a good place. I think actually we looked at a good example of merging geometry already, so maybe we won't cover this again. Maybe we'll just very quickly talk about this in terms of merging, since we've, I guess, kind of already covered this in when we were looking at using Dynamesh and ZRemesher in our legs. So very quickly what I'll do, since I'm kind of repeating something here, is I will just take this geometry. They both have subdivs. I'll just delete the subdivs because we're not going to need them. I'm going to combine these two pieces of geometry and Dynamesh them. After we have Dynameshed them, we can continue working and smoothing this out. They're combined, yay, good on ya. But if you want to get something a little bit easier to work with, we would duplicate and then look at using a ZRemesh to give us something a little bit more low poly to work with, something a little bit more simple. And then we would take those two pieces of geometry, one with the low poly subdivision level, this one right here, and then the one with the high poly subdivision level, and we will project the high res detail onto the low one. So I'll subdivide, project, and subdivide and project. And just so you can see some of that happening, if I were to, there, got Follygon right there in beautiful, beautiful cursive. I'll subdivide and project from that mesh onto this one, and that will project everything from that previous mesh onto this one. So there's the Follygon. We'll delete that old one because we don't need it anymore. And now we can begin cleaning up where our arm here, or our front leg, I guess, arm, our deer arm was connected there, and start really, really smoothing that out and just paying close attention to our silhouette to make sure nothing crazy is happening. And of course, we can get rid of our little text there as well. Let's see. Text says, as a Blender user new to ZBrush, it's not easier, but it is better. In terms of sculpting tools, ZBrush is the industry standard. That is absolutely true. Way more tools and brushes and everything else. Yes, absolutely. Do you from HUDboy, good old HUDboy here, he says, do you typically do this on a clone of your subtool, or do you not care about it being a bit destructive? I'm not I think maybe you're asking, do I, for the splitting and combining and all of that. No, I do not. I do not really care about it being destructive. The only clone that I do create is that duplicated piece that is the higher resolution version of this, so that I can project that information onto the low res. I do not take the time to like duplicate a second piece of geometry, because I have my undos up here, and it's really rare that I need to roll back because of a poor projection, and if I do, again, we have the undos. That is why when you do this operation, it's very important that you project onto your top subtool when duplicating. So here, I'll delete that again. When you duplicate a mesh, a piece of geometry, a subtool, not delete, duplicate, it will create one underneath your original. And if you look here, this is the undo slider. You'll notice that the bottom one does not have any undos. The top one does retain all of your undos. So all of these are still here. I can scrub through all of those, and that is, you know, there's a quick view of me attaching those legs to the body there. And writing our name. So, the top one is the important one that you want to hang on to. If you have a crash and you lose some of those undos while you're doing that, it's typically, you know, I still have the bottom one, so it shouldn't really be a problem. I've never really had a problem or a reason to hold on to it. But if you want to be extra careful, I don't think it's going to hurt anything. It's just going to take a little bit of extra time. Clean up our little text there. And you'll notice as I'm doing some of this, the surface is getting pretty hectic. So I would definitely take the time to clean that up, and thankfully we already have done so. Taking the time to clean that up, attach our legs, and pose this. So here's a good example again of that, where I have the mouth, I have the piece that I split off on the bottom. The one on the bottom only has the undos up to the point where I split that off and closed holes. So I can actually delete that, make it go away, and just have the top one run through the undos. I'm just hitting Control Z here, and eventually get back to where that mouth was still connected there. All right, let's see here. Trouble with splitting models, merging tools, that was from Steven over on YouTube, and there's a bunch more here. I'm trying to cover a lot of the most common ones that I see, but again, if you guys have any questions right now, now's the time to ask them. I will take your questions over some of the people that aren't here. Whoops, just closed it. Alright, the next one is going to be a little bit longer, and I've done this many times on stream, but I would like to at least attempt to reiterate some of this information and just try to go over some of the basics again. So I'm going to hide everything except my head. I'll even hide a bunch of my hair, just kind of in the way. How hard is it to make a living as a digital sculptor? Asks Zofo. I would say, you know, it depends. It depends. What are you doing? As a digital sculptor, if you're working freelance, or if you have a full-time job, you know, I don't know. I don't think it's probably that hard, but in terms of getting there, getting up to that point, I think there's a lot of work that needs to go into it. If you're already an artistic person, maybe you're a traditional sculptor, I think transitioning over to the digital side would be a lot easier for you because you already understand a lot of the basics about form and creating a lot of those things. I'm actually going to turn on part of our shirt so this doesn't feel quite as awkward. I don't really know where that is though. Let's see. In terms of working freelance, I think freelance in general is pretty tough for anybody. I think digital sculpting is tough. I don't know what you want to compare it to. Kind of hard without anything to really compare it to, I guess. If you're asking if it's just hard, yeah, I think it's really tough. I think the market is really small, and I think the number of people in the industry is maybe not, I would be hard pressed to say oversaturated. I think it is oversaturated, but I would also say that it's oversaturated with amazing talent, not just necessarily quantity. So if you're going to be a full-time digital sculptor and that's how you're going to make your living, you're gonna have to be really good at it. You're gonna have to be, you know, one of the best if you want to get some work. So in that regards, I think it's very tough. Yes. I would say. So back in the Renaissance period, it was really popular to think of art in a similar way to how they looked at medical professionals. And I would honestly, like, in terms of school and study and everything else that goes into getting up to that point where you are a professional, where you are making a living doing it, I would say the time invested is equivalent between those two. So, and you know what, maybe it's not exactly the same, right? I'm using this as a mindset for you. If you are new or if you are thinking about going into the industry, would you be willing to go, you know, to quote school or, you know, study for like 8 years, 6 or 8 years? Would you be willing to do that, to have a full-time job, to like be at the level where you have enough skill to be able to work in the industry? And it doesn't take that long for everybody, you know, like I said, and I think people that have an artistic background already, that are getting into digital art, I think they're going to have a lot easier time moving forward. But would you be willing to put in that amount of time? And if the answer is yes, you know, go for it. If it's not, you know, maybe rethink about the reasons why you're trying to get into this industry. When I search for jobs using keywords like ZBrush or 3D artist, model, almost none come up on traditional job search engines. There's a lot of stuff posted online for stuff like ArtStation, for Polycount, those type of websites. I would be looking there. I would also not put in, like I said, I think maybe not oversaturated in terms of quantity of people. I think it is a little bit, but oversaturated in terms of quality of people. Like I said, everybody, it's so competitive. Everybody's at the top of their game, and there's definitely some competition there. And you have to be, you know, best of the best if you want to be getting those jobs, or if you even want people reaching out to you for work. That's something that's even harder to get to a point where that's starting to happen. But yes, if you're on a traditional job search engine like what's the popular one, Indeed.com. If you search for like character artist or concept artist, yeah, I think jobs will definitely pop up. With all your experience, what do you think is really lacking in most portfolios that hiring managers are looking for? I think whoops, I closed my stream. Hold on. I think it depends on what the job is and what you're going for. I think there's definitely a lack of specificity in a lot of people's work and a lot of things that they are trying to accomplish. If I were to just hop on ArtStation and look at a random person's portfolio, I think a lack of specificity is something that would be a very common thing. I tend to do a lot of heavily stylized characters. Pretty much everything in here is a character. There are a few things that are not characters, just because for some reason, if people see one thing or a lot of one thing, who was it? Oh, I can't remember the artist, but all they did was draw, attractive women, and they got a job request and they were like, hey, we just want to see a dude, we just want to make sure that you can draw a dude. And the person's an amazing artist, and they're like, of course I can draw a freaking dude, of course I can digitally paint a guy, just because I do this is what I'm known for. People think that you can't do this other thing. It's I don't know, it blows my mind. But yes, I think a lack of specificity, and I think a lack of a lack of skill. If you're familiar with the Dunning-Kruger effect, I think this is a very, very common thing in the art and 3D world. The Dunning-Kruger effect is essentially you start off and you get to that point of very low competence, but your confidence is way up here. And it's because you don't exactly know what you don't know. And like I said, I think I could go onto a lot of portfolios on ArtStation or anywhere else, CG Central or CG Society. Nobody even uses those anymore. At least I don't. But I think you would see a lot of people that are applying to jobs that are kind of around this area, and they're starting to apply to a lot of jobs, and they're realizing over time, very slowly, that maybe they're not up to what they thought they were, and they're kind of the roller coaster's starting to tip. And everybody goes through this. Everybody's going to go through this period. And it's a rough period where you come to that realization where you're like, wow, I'm actually not up to par. I'm not actually good enough to get this job, get this opportunity. And like I said, it is highly competitive. There is a very large skill gap between, I think, professionals and people that are just starting out, and between there, sky's the limit. But I would say that's what I see a lot of lacking in portfolios in general. Like I said, though, it depends what you're going for, depends what you're applying to. Character artists got a lot of hits on the search for the job websites. Yeah, looking for specific job titles is definitely going to get that. All right, I don't see any other questions here. So we will look at creating some eyes, guys. Or maybe not creating eyes, but I'll talk about some of the important things when creating eyes. This comes from Aesir over on YouTube. Who's asking about how to essentially create Disney-style eyes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off my poly paint because I don't want us to focus on paint. I want us to focus on form and how important form really is in creating these eyes. So eyes are a really important part of your character. They're one of the most emotive parts of your character. A lot of expression comes from your eyes. A lot of expression can come from your mouth as well for your character. I wonder if I have... Yeah, I do. Let's do this. This is my base mesh of this character, which is also available on my Gumroad. Gumroad.com/Follygon. You can get this stylized character base mesh for only 3 doll hairs. Wowie zowie. So, here's the base mesh. Kind of like a Disney style, Disney proportioned base mesh. And I have things split up into subtools to make it easier to work with individual parts and pieces. But again, we'll be focusing on our head, and specifically on our eyes. So what I want us to look at is a few different things here. A few different problem areas that I noticed that are very common when looking at eyes and faces in general. One of the first things, let's turn off auto collapse. One of the first things that I would say to attempt doing is getting a lot of those parts and pieces in there as quick as you can. Because things are, it's a lot easier to reference what's going on in a concept or notice what's wrong once you start, in my opinion, once you start getting those eyelashes and eyebrows and everything else in there. It's easier to reference what this shape should be. It's easier to figure out how far these should be apart once, you know, that thing is actually in there. Can't really figure out maybe where your brows need to go until you get some of those eyebrows in there. That can be very helpful. Another thing that is very common in eyes and faces in general is when I see a face, it can look, oh, you know what, I think you know, I'm not going to remember the artist off the top of my head. But one of the common things is it looks great from the front view, but as you start to turn around, your faces look really flat, and I'm not even kidding. Flat to like this degree. I've obviously over-exaggerated a lot of that, but here, we'll do it like this. Let that quick save do its thing. Like flat to this degree, where it's just so flat. Oh my gosh, ZBrush, come on. Wait, it didn't crash, it just minimized. That was weird. Yes, good job, ZBrush. I'm sorry I doubted you. So yeah, you know, it still can look decent from that front view, you know, here. Like all the shape, everything's there. Wow, it's looking great. But then you start to turn around to the side and things are just, whoa, okay. All right, so maybe you worked a little bit too much on that front view, and you need to keep in mind that we have some other views that we need to pay attention to and rotate around. So those are my probably first two major notes. Moving forward from there, just eye shape in general. It's really tough. It's really tough to get some clean and appealing eyes. But making sure that the basic shape that you have going on here, you can look up a lot of tutorials online for figuring out the basic shapes that need to occur in terms of where some hits need to happen. So getting a little bit more of a pull up on that inner upper lid corner, a little bit more on that outer bottom lid corner, that can help to create a little bit more of an appealing sweep. And then I would say on stylized characters, don't underestimate how far you can, or how far you need to pull back that outside corner of the eye. It's probably a lot more than you think. You can probably push it quite a bit more. So those are some things that I like to keep in mind with my eyes. Another thing that's extremely important is for your inner edge of your eyelid. Try to get this plane, this inner plane here that I'm sculpting on, and this inner plane here, try to get that to point towards the center of your eyeball. And you're probably going to have some pretty large eyes in a stylized character. So let's see here. Looks like it's, come back. So roughly that angle there. Let's see, here's our center of our eyeball. We'll pull that out. So maybe I could even bend that a little bit more, and then from our bottom lid, that one looks like it's pretty good. But what this ends up doing for your eyelid, and I think it's reading just fine, but it helps the read of your eyelid in creating that shadowed area. You can see that it's actually a little bit highlighted more here than it is over here, so this angle is probably a little bit closer. It helps create that shadow there. I didn't really care though, because the lashes are covering that up. For the bottom one though, getting a nice clean highlight all the way through. So maybe there's probably some of that moving that I was doing before. Maybe you can like trim that up. Just make sure that that's pointing towards that middle portion there. I think that'll help you out quite a bit. And then the other major thing that I would say to really focus on, and it's less apparent in this character because the eyes are so very large, but it's a thing called eyelid order. And this is something that's going to help your eyelids look a lot more natural. It's something that occurs in humans naturally with their eyelids. But if you were to look at your eyelid from the profile view and draw a horizontal line and pull that towards your character, the first point that should hit is the top eyelid. the top eyelid on the outside there. And then the next point that should hit on that vertical line is your inner, your lower eyelid, sorry, not your inner eyelid, your lower eyelid. And then the next hit should be your inner corner. And like I said, these eyes are huge, so this gap maybe isn't as large as it would be on a more realistic character. And then that last hit should be the outside corner, which is of course back extremely far because of that very large stylized eye. So top, bottom, inner corner, outer corner. Keep that in mind, as well as the plane and overall eye shape, and I think that will really get you heading in a good direction there with your eyes. I hear you should do retopology in programs other than ZBrush. I would agree with that. Is that because it doesn't do it well, or because folks don't know how to do it right in ZBrush? It's definitely because the retopology tools in ZBrush are not very good. If you are wanting to create a figure for animation, if a character is going to be in real time and it's going to be animated, if it's real time, your topology won't really matter quite as much. You only need topology to hold the form. But if it's a character and it's going to be animated, you will want topology that will support the movement of that character being animated. So you maybe want an extra edge loop in some places where it would deform any joint. You can look up a ton of tutorials on proper retopology. The retopology that I do in ZBrush is done mainly using polygroups with ZRemesh to get specific edge loops and just to control my form a little bit more. And then also the ZRemesher guides brush occasionally. My form of retopology is only necessary up to a point, much like something needs to be viewed in real time. I only need it to hold the form. Nothing I create is typically for animation. Most of the stuff that I do is for physical production. So if I'm creating something like our dragon boy here, our dragonborn, the topology that I have in place in some places at one point was clean, but now I've dynameshed a bunch of stuff together and it doesn't even matter. So it's only dependent on exactly what you need for that project. So if you're brand new to 3D and you want to get into video games, most likely, that's probably the most common thing that I see. I want to work on video games. I want to be a 3D modeler in video games, right? I also thought that at one point. I love production though. I really do. Then you're gonna have to learn some retopology. The retopology tools again in ZBrush work with Z-spheres. They don't have very much control, and they're lacking a lot of really not necessary functions, but very helpful functions that you would find in something like Maya, Maxmodo, or any number of full-fledged 3D softwares. Yes, it's definitely easier to do it. Definitely easier in 3D Coat, in my opinion. I have used 3D Coat for retopo and UVing. The UVing toolset in 3D Coat, in my opinion, is amazing. It's phenomenal. And actually, ZBrush has a UVing toolset that is coming in the next version that's actually very similar to 3D Coat's UV toolset. Very, very similar. Can I show you what questions you have from YouTube? So the first one was, and by the way, if you're joining us late, all this stuff is going up on my YouTube channel. These are just most common questions that I typed up really quick from stuff that I saw on YouTube. So the first one was working with Dynamesh and subdivs. The second one was working with extractions, which we showed. Using curve brushes, trouble with merging tools, or splitting tools and merging tools, and just working with both of those. And then the last one that we just looked at was with splitting eyes, creating eyes in like a Disney style. And we gave some info on some of the key factors that you want to keep in mind for doing something like that. These are not the copy paste. I just have a note document here that I I did not copy paste. I just typed up a bunch of stuff and wrote down who they were from on YouTube. But these are questions that I see all the time, yeah. Alright. Johnny Ree, thank you for the follow. How you doing? Welcome to the stream. As well as everybody else. The last kind of big question that I have here, do I also stream on YouTube? I used to. I used to stream primarily on YouTube just because that's where a large chunk of my audience is. But yes, ever since I became a Twitch affiliate, they have, what is it, like 24 hours of, what would be the word? I guess like priority. You can't stream it or post it anywhere else, or they'll drop you as an affiliate. So I'm a Twitch affiliate, so I cannot do that, and I respect the rules for Twitch. But yeah, let's see. I don't think we have any other big questions here before I move on. So the last kind of conglomerate of questions, I will say, not from anybody specific, but from a lot of people. I see this a lot. And I have a bunch of stuff imported here, and maybe we can even look at some old images, because it's been a while. I pulled this stuff up somewhat recently, but I'm gonna pull up some old stuff by me. I'm gonna scroll through a bunch of old crap here and try to find some stuff. So the basic question is, let me open it back up. A lot of the stuff is something along the lines of, hey, I'm using the same brushes as you and I'm not getting the same effect, or I'm following along and I'm doing what you're doing, but my sculpt, my 3D model, isn't looking like yours. It's not looking the same. Mine looks awful. How do you make yours look like that? Essentially, that's a lot of the like main conglomerate there questions. So what I'm going to do, let me open up a bunch of old stuff here. We're gonna look through some old Follygon garbage that I have done in the past. Let me see. See if I got some stuff here. Yeah, we'll just open this up. I don't care. All right. So we are way back in the timeline on old stuff that I used to post. This is from a long time ago, but I want to look at a few specifics here so that you guys can see. This was the first sculpt that I ever did, and I did this in Mudbox. I didn't know what ZBrush was at the time, and yeah, it's something, right? This is what a lot of people's first sculpts look like. Maybe not as phallic as mine. Mine looks very phallic, but it's definitely definitely disturbing. It's not good, right? It's pretty terrible. I'm totally fine saying that. I think it looks like a big old trash can swirling down a toilet. But you know, don't be discouraged, is what I'm trying to say here. Everybody starts from trash. Here's some more stuff that I did with some skulls. This was one of the first things that I think this was maybe the first thing that I ever sculpted in ZBrush. Started off with a sphere. We got the red wax material, heck yeah. I'll zoom in here. And just started using the rake brush. I was using the rake brush at this time. I wouldn't recommend using the rake brush. It's kind of terrible. Skull, you know, it's pretty terrible in my opinion. So the reason why I show off all this stuff, here's some more garbage, right? Started off with this base mesh, and what the heck is this thing? What the heck is this monstrosity? And what I recommend, if you are in this stage, you're in the stage of suck, in the stage of big old poop sandwiches that you're sculpting all the time, I highly recommend that you switch over to a period of quantity over quality. And the reason I suggest that is because you're in a stage where you're learning the software, you're learning how to be efficient with the software, how it works best with you, but you're also learning the other side, the more difficult side, which is the sculptural side of ZBrush. ZBrush is not like, you know, other softwares where it's like you learn how to use it and then you got it, you're good, right? You're not learning how to use Microsoft Word. You're learning how to use a tool that lets you sculpt digitally. And the hard part of that is not learning the tool. Maybe it's a little hard in the beginning. But the hard part of that is learning how to sculpt. And sculpting is definitely difficult. There's a lot of time that you need to put into that, which is why I wanted to show you guys some of that old stuff and also show you guys a transitional period for me, which is a time where I went into a stage where I decided that I was going to do a bunch of daily sculpts. And the idea of this was to do that quantity over quality. And look at some of this stuff. Like, this is disturbing. Like, holy crap. And this material, I don't know why I was using this material and why her ears are going through this terrible hood that I sculpted. But I think it's important to see this stuff from other artists. I'm not embarrassed or afraid to show off garbage that I sculpted forever ago. Let's look at a few of these. But what I did was 100 days of daily sculpting. Let's see, we're on day 60 here. We got some more stuff, some more junk. And this was near the end of that 100 days of daily sculpting. And I'll show just the black and white sculpt here so we can see the difference. So day 1, hippopotamus, right? Really messy, kind of all over the place. I really liked doing animals because I found that they were a lot easier than doing humans. Humans are really tough, and you know, this is still really poor. I've actually done a hippo, baby Fiona, somewhat recently. So maybe we can look at the difference in hippopotamus sculptures. This was posted a year ago. So here's a hippo from maybe like 4 or 5 years ago or something, and here's a hippo from like a year ago. But yeah, you know, definitely a huge upgrade there. So, you know, day 1, day 2, the whole objective was just to get something out there, just to sculpt. And I really think that's something that a lot of people should try to do early on. Here's an elephant. This was what, day 4? All right, and now we're jumping up to like day 60. This was something I remember this day. Is like, I just got to do something really quick. Like, I got to keep doing it. I got to keep going. But here's something more towards the end of that whole process. So this was like day 90 something, and there's definitely a huge improvement in terms of this. I'm not sure what I was thinking with the beard coming out of the chin there, the braided beard. But yes, here's this finished dude with some render. He kind of looks like, this material looks very much like fruit or vegetable skin or something. But just looking at the sculpt here, you know, there's definite improvement in terms of what I'm seeing. I think spent maybe a little bit more time on this than a lot of those others, but I really just want to hit home like how important it is to really put in that time. And I'll scroll up through like a ton of, you know, I don't post like every single thing that I work on, and I don't even really post on here anymore. But just, you know, over time you'll get there. You will get there. It just takes time. Little owlboy. But that is really what I wanted to focus on there. Do you really good at hiding the good art button? Yes, there is a secret easy button. I wish. Saw some red wax. Yes, of course. Seeing some of your sculpts and matching it up to the trash. Yes, absolutely. Thank you for showing. Really inspiring. Yeah, absolutely. That is the main thing that I want to show, because a lot of the time I get a lot of questions that are, hey, you know, I'm using the clay tubes brush, and I just can't use it the way that you're using. using it. And it's like, well, of course you can't. It's gonna be a while before you get to a point where you really understand not just the tool set, but also, you know, how to efficiently use those tools and how to understand, you know, a lot of those fundamentals in 3D sculptural form and really push past to that next level. And I'm still growing, you know. I learn new stuff all the time in terms of 3D form and sculpture and just like pushing my own stuff to the next level. But it's not a race. It is not a race, guys. You know, sometimes it feels like it, but yeah, you will get there eventually. And if you're at a point where you're like, how do I do that thing that they are doing? Why can't I do that? It's just, you need more time. Mileage is the only difference between someone that is, you know, much more advanced than yourself and that person. I believe that anybody could paint the Mona Lisa, right? But maybe for me, it would maybe take a year to do that, or even longer. But I would eventually get there, right? I would eventually get there. But if I have that backlog of a crap ton of hours that I've been painting for, you know, my entire life, and now it's like, okay, I'm gonna paint the Mona Lisa, and I do it in a day or two. It's like, wow, like, why can't I do that? And that's because people, and this is like really the short TLDR of the whole thing, people will see the end result, but they will not see the work that goes into it. People often see the end result, and I even do this, and it's just kind of a product of the digital world, and you know, you can only have so much time to admire other people's work, but you're browsing through ArtStation, right, and you find somebody's work, and you're like, oh, cool, I'll look at that, you know, that's neat, I'll give it a like, sure, click on that, and go on to the next thing, and you look at it for like 6 seconds at the most. Like, that is the world that we live in. But again, people see that end result, and not all the work that went into it, and all the work that came prior to it building up to that point. Are you a Pokemon fan? Yes. Yes, I am. I am a Pokemon fan. I have actually sculpted stuff for Tomy for Pokemon in the past. And I have, let's see, four of these? Here. I have a bunch of, whoops, one second. I have a bunch of prints on my desk of fusions of different things. Like this is a Nidoking and a Gyarados. 3D printed and fused fusion of them, so that's full color SLS sandstone. I have Vulpix, or not Vulpix. Is it Vulpix? Yes, it is. Vulpix and Butterfree. I believe this is Vulpix and Butterfree. Now I can't remember. And then I have some more like different ones. Like here is Lapras and Spyro. He's a lot of fun. Sorry, it's kind of hard to hold him. But yeah, he was a lot of fun to work on. And then I have my favorite out of all those, which is my Pikachu Totoro. If you guys have ever seen My Neighbor Totoro. Ooh, try to spin that around a little bit more carefully. But yes, I do like Pokemon. I grew up with a Game Boy in my hands. A Game Boy fused to my hands, I should say. Thank you, Volpsy. Appreciate it. And if you guys want to check out more of those 3D prints, I'm not trying to solicit, but there is my 3D print shop down below. There's a link to them. If you just want to look at them, there's like a ton. There's 2, 4, 6, 8. Oh, there's like maybe 15 or so on there, maybe more. There's a bunch. There's a bunch of them. And actually, for our next thing, I'm going to do something that is 3D printable. This is maybe one of the more disturbing ones. Where's my mouse at? My mouse is stuck. Sonic plus Yoshi. So beautiful. I love his cute little booty. It's the main reason. Yoshi's adorable. I love Nintendo in general. But yeah, that's a quick look back on the past and, you know, trying to answer some of those questions about, you know, how do I do that thing that you're doing? Why can't I do that? Why doesn't my thing look like your thing? Volpsy, thank you for the follow. Appreciate it. Must be amazing to physically hold what you made. Do you recommend any companies or websites for 3D printing one unit? I use Shapeways for my SLS full color sandstone prints. I cannot afford an SLS machine like they use for these because it costs about $90,000 US, so I can't do that. Not many people can. I did buy an SLA. Oh, I'm sorry, maybe buy is the wrong term. I did kickstart an SLA printer, never got it, and I requested a refund. They said okay. They never gave me the refund. So that's fun. If you guys do want a printer, don't buy one from Kudo 3D. They will steal your money. Color SLS. No, I don't have that printer. Again, it's like incredibly expensive, like almost $100,000. I really want to buy one when you can afford. You can get an SLA printer for probably, a little under $1,000 for a decent one. Engine says, how do you export your model for 3D printing? I just shared this during our last stream. I'll share it again really quick for those interested in color 3D printing. But over on my YouTube channel, I have a ton of tutorials and live streams that have been uploaded on there. But here is a ZBrush tutorial, hey everyone, for exporting your stuff for full color printing from ZBrush. And I'll just paste that in the chat for you guys. There we go. And if you guys want to see, so this goes over in about 5 or 6 minutes, the entire process, and that'll give you a really good overview. If you're maybe not as experienced as some others or as myself with ZBrush and you don't know a lot of the tools, I mention a lot of those tools down here for extra additional tutorials. Or if you just want to watch the live stream version, I go through the entire process for this SpongeBob muffin that I made, and I stream on this was on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel. So I go through the entire process from beginning to end, and how to upload that to Shapeways, how to make sure it's hollowed out, how to do everything with that. So you can check that out as well. And actually, it is Tuesday, so I am streaming on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel tonight. I stream on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel on Tuesdays at 6 p.m. EST, and I stream here on my channel every day at noon EST. Absolutely, yeah, happy to help, guys. And let's see, I don't see any additional questions, but if you guys do have anything else, I would love to answer any additional questions or try to help out what I can. Post it in the chat if you got something. Like I said, we're taking priority over the YouTube questions. I've pretty much gone through most of the stuff that I've picked out of there. There are a few more that I could probably think of off the top of my head of stuff that I get asked a lot, but I have an FAQ down below for a bunch of stuff. I'm gonna clear my canvas here. We got so much stuff floating around. Make this a little bit easier to work on. But yes, tonight, 6 p.m. EST, Pixologic, Pixologic. Come and hang out if you are going to be around. Love to chat. We're going to be doing something probably with our deer character. I've been working on this for the past like 4 streams maybe now. And a lot of what we're in right now is what I'm calling the last 10%. And honestly, you can throw in like as much as you did in the first 90% into that last 10%. It just depends, how far you want to push something, because I'm sure everybody's heard the saying, art is never finished. You just abandon it eventually. And that's definitely true. I think I want to clean up some of the stuff that's going on in my ears right now. I'm getting some nasty stars, and it's really stretching that geometry and making it tough to work with. So I'm going to try cleaning that up here. Let's do I don't remember what I was dynameshing at before. We'll see if this works. Fix my material as well. what am I going to do on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel today? Again, probably be, here, I'll unhide all this. Probably be working on this deer, taking it to the last 10%, like I said. There's still some cleanup that really needs to happen in the ankles. If not, if there's something specific that somebody wants to see, or if I can have, or find something else that I want to start working on. It's, I'm not going to be streaming on Wednesday and Thursday this week because it's Thanksgiving and I'm going to be out of town, so I won't be around. So I don't want to start something new right before that happens. So that's why we did the Q&A session today, and hopefully it's been helpful for some of you. I think we covered a lot of really good info, and I think, like I said, it's always really nice to see a lot of that old stuff, a lot of that old artwork that people have, just seeing where people come from. We got a creepy little face in here still, so that's beautiful. But yeah, I feel like, you know, you see that end result and you're like, they were just born that way. They just started off doing that. Because you're not, you know, on a professional portfolio site like ArtStation or something, you're not going to post your bad work. You have to really curate that stuff. You have to make sure that you're always putting your best foot forward, so that if somebody comes across your work and wants to hire you, they scroll through your stuff and they're like, oh, that looks good, that looks good. Ooh, you thought that should be on your portfolio? Why? Maybe, you know, maybe this person isn't as level-headed as we originally thought. So because of that, you have to heavily curate your work and make sure that you're always putting your best stuff online. Continue to clean up this head here. Silvery says, I normally output an OBJ file, but the surface map is gone. I'm not entirely sure what you're talking about. I don't think I missed any additional messages here. If you're in ZBrush, specifically, I don't know if you're talking about ZBrush, I highly recommend that you save your object, or whatever you're sculpting, your character, whatever, as a tool. And that will save everything in the additional subtools down here. I'm not sure why this ZBrush is taking so long, but that'll save all of your additional subtools. It'll concatenate that all into a Z tool. So a tool is the encompassing collection of your subtools. You can also go up into File, Save As, and that will save a ZBrush project. I recommend that you don't do that unless you're specifically saving your undos, because that file will end up being about 10 times larger than your Z tool, and it will pretty much have all the, your Z tool will have everything that you need as well. Essentially, if you're at a point and if you're going to File, Save As, and you don't know why you're doing that, don't do that. Don't save this way. Very bad. Save over here. Tools, Save As, and this will save your tool that you are working on. And probably the reason you're doing that, I mean, I know the reason. It's because it's File, Save As. That's how you save in programs, not in ZBrush. That's not how you should save in ZBrush. Save you a lot of space by doing it that way. So we're looking at some quick projection for our poly paint. And again, the whole reason I'm doing this is to get that star out of the corner of the ear, and it is no longer there. It's on a flat surface now, so that's much better. Stars in tight areas are very often problematic, animation-wise, and for just sculpturally, you know, creating form. That's why sometimes it is easier to Dynamesh something out, which is what I did here. I Dynameshed it so that it would completely erase the old topology, so that it wouldn't be, ZRemesher wouldn't be informed by that, and then just make it exactly the same. So that'd be completely pointless to do that at that point. So I think I'm going to clean up my ears just a little bit here after this is finished projecting. It is a very slow projection. I probably have too many files loaded into ZBrush right now, and I should probably delete a lot of those, especially for my quick saves. A quick save does save a ZPR, so that will save everything in your current scene, which can sometimes take quite a long time. This is being very slow, very laggy. So let me see here, make sure we don't have any additional questions in chat. And I think somebody was asking about my ZBrush UI, and somebody else was asking about my ZBrush colors. There, that's done uploading. But if you are interested in getting that, if there's enough interest in grabbing my UI, you can get that in my Quick Start course. I don't have it uploaded anywhere else, but I will consider uploading that if enough people want it. It looks like that cleaned up pretty well. I'll probably spend time off of stream doing that. We're going to have a little bit of a shorter one today because I'm going to be on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel later. But I do want to thank you all for coming and hanging out. And I hope that, again, a lot of the questions here have been helpful to go over. And if you have any additional questions, you guys can always feel free to email me at follygon@gmail.com. And the last thing I'll shout out here at the end of the stream is just my Gumroad. There's a link down below. It is gumroad.com/Follygon. If you're brand new to ZBrush and you're just trying to get started, I recommend my How to ZBrush course. It's essentially a way to get up and running in ZBrush as quick as possible. That again does include my UI and colors and everything else. All my brushes and all that good stuff, materials, all that in just one package there. Then there's also my Sculpting for Toys and Collectibles course, which is a little bit more of an intermediate level, and then some more advanced stuff as well. And then I have some brushes, materials, all sorts of good stuff on here. You can grab 4 of these curved brushes for 1 buckaroo, and you can grab like 5 base meshes for a single doll hair as well. But yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff in here. I would appreciate it if you checked it out. I don't pay anything to advertise, so word of mouth and you guys coming here and hanging out is the only way that it gets out. Again, thank you for coming and hanging out, guys. This video, if you are jumping in here a little bit late, will be over on my YouTube channel. It's just Follygon on YouTube. Just Google Follygon and you'll find all my stuff, or there's links down below. But again, streaming tonight on the Pixelogic ZBrush channel at 6 p.m. Eastern US time. I think that's -5 GMT, depending on where you are in the world. And I hope to see you there. Or if not, I stream every other day, on every day except for Sunday, here on at noon EST. But thank you, Lamentio, Silver, Engine, Hubert, Alodora, Stang, am I missing Zofo, everybody else that's coming and hanging out. I appreciate you guys, and I will see you next time. I'm going to find somebody to do a quick raid here with, so I'd appreciate it if you stuck around, but if not, no worries. And I will see you guys later. Have a great rest of your day. Bye now.